Welcome everyone to Color Commentary. We are your Pauper commentators, Michael Pitchick and Adrian Guarzales. How's it going, Adrian?
Yeah.
I'm glad you're at least like spicing it up week to week.
Yeah.
God, how long is this going to continue for?
All right, you ruined it. I'm done. I would have kept doing it until you said something.
I kind of figured that it's easy to disrupt.
It's actually from a bit from the first recorded Guar concert. The guy who would eventually become Otis Urangus, Dave Brocky, gets on stage, and there's I guess he's the guitarist. I'm actually not really sure. And he's like, "Johnny, are you flying in this weekend?" And the guy goes, "Yeah." And then Dave says, "Johnny, are you flying in this weekend?" And the guy says, "Yeah." And they do this for like 2.5 minutes, and I don't know why. It was great.
All right, so weekly recap, our upkeep step, if you will. Any magic news from you?
Yes, I split with Aaron Rubin at F&M. We actually fired. He was playing Blue Red Delver, and I was playing Colothaboros, the deck I always play.
Oh, did he actually finally swap over to Blue Red?
Yeah, his and I mean it's nothing that we've talked about here, but basically that deck just eats mono Blue Delver alive and also has some pretty good game against Stompy. So it is a strong deck. We of course debated some of the finer points. I think there are too few lands in that deck. I don't know if he agrees with me or not. You'll have to let us know what you think, Aaron. But yeah, he's been having a lot of success with it, especially on Moto. I think on Moto he might have maybe 3 5-0s with it. So he's been very successful. Again, though, a very good player, so that doesn't really surprise me. I think Aaron could probably pilot Reality Acid and be fine.
Yeah, didn't he top 4 an SCG event not that long ago?
Yeah, we have. He actually wasn't on camera though. He was on the off cam. But there are pictures of him making some derpy faces, and it's great. I razz him about it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, the only magic thing I've got is that I've got people coming over to, and I want to brace you for this one because it's going to be uncomfortable for you to hear. I got people coming over to play Commander.
No. That's actually sounds pretty good.
I've got like a nice, good space in my house now with a big old table and a bunch of comfy chairs, so I can actually have people over.
I have a kind of a fun format that I'd like to tell you about real fast if we have the time.
Go for it.
I'm just going to do it. It's called Commander Cube. So let me tell you how it works. It's a cube, right? Okay. Got that out of the way. So the first part of the drafting is you draft a commander. And what you do is you have 3 commanders for each person in the draft pod, and you draft them rotisserie so that at the end of the draft, everyone has 3 commanders. And so you draft those face up, and then you do the cube draft, and you draft, I want to say maybe 6 packs, 7 packs. So you draft more than normal. It might be 4. You draft more than normal is the point. And the goal is to create a 60-card commander deck. And so people can maybe know what colors you're in based on the cards you pick, your commanders, but no one's really sure. Like if you have a commander in every color, you could theoretically go any which way. So after that, in order to help sort of, boost the playability of the decks, you are given a little intro pack, which includes, I think, Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse, not Soul Ring because we decided that was too powerful. But basically, it contains like some mana rocks and some basic fixing. And so you have these 5 cards to start off your deck, and then you build a 60-card deck. Well, 59, plus your 1 commander, and then you play a game of Commander using your deck.
I've seen lists for Commander cubes, and I've always kind of been curious and wanted to try one out, but I've never had occasion. And also, a lot of the lists are pretty pricey. Like Commander cards get up there.
Yeah, I mean, but you could theoretically do it for Pauper Commander even if you wanted to. It's a very fun format. But yeah, it does depend on your commanders also, I guess, like what you have available.
Yeah. Did I tell you what I'm playing in Commander, or do you want to take a guess?
Is it Shroom the Hegemon?
No, actually, surprisingly.
What is
it? Nothing to do with artifacts. I built Queen Marchesa.
Oh yeah, I did know this. You called it what did you call it? Your boss ladies with daggers deck. Is that what it is? Or,
Murder ladies. There's
murder lady.
There's coincidentally a lot of cards that work well in it that happen to be, murderous ladies. But
that's great.
Enough non-Pauper news. Today we are doing a deck tech that's kind of a rehash. We did this like 5 months ago.
And we're allowed.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's worth talking about this again. We're going to talk about Stompy, mainly because Stompy is a very big part of the meta right now. And with challenges coming up, in fact, this episode will be releasing right in the middle of the first ever Pauper challenges. It's kind of relevant to get some more information out here about this deck because going in, this is kind of the favored list. And I imagine it's going to make up a good chunk of the meta and probably a good chunk of the top 32. And has a pretty decent chance to win it all. The last time we covered this, though, was well before Modern Masters 3/2017. I wish they would just go with the numbering, but I guess we're stuck with years. But they got Burning Tree Emissary, and Burning Tree Emissary is a big deal. It is a great aggro card, and it looks like Stompy is the one that just puts it together a little bit better than the sort of red deck wins Sly style deck. But let's get into this. We can go pretty quickly through this. If you want to, you can reference the other episode. It's called Hungry Like the Wolf after the Duran Duran song because deck played Young Wolf, still does.
Wait, that's after the. I'm kidding.
Hey, I'm willing to bet that there are at least a handful of our viewers who do not know who Duran Duran is.
Yeah.
All right.
Maybe.
Let's get into this, though. Nettle Sentinel, 2/2 for green. Doesn't untap. Whenever you cast green spell, untap Nettle Sentinel. 2/2s for 1. Yeah. 2/2s for 1 are just like the bread and butter of this deck.
He just untaps whenever you do something. You sneeze and he untaps.
Pretty much. There's actually now a couple of things in this deck that don't trigger him, but we'll get to that later. Next, we've got 4 copies Quirion Ranger. Green for 1/1 has the activated ability return a forest you control to your hand, untap target creature. Works as ramp, works as a way to have a surprise creature back up. It's got all sorts of neat little plays.
Yeah. Quirion Ranger is really in this deck. So in Elves, you use it to trigger your money cards. By that, I mean your strong cards. Mostly the one that, what's his name? He taps and he buffs your elves. In this deck, you're mostly using it. Yeah, Timberwatch. In this deck, you're mostly using it to make land drops, which is a sort of a different style, but you can also use untap a blocker or untap an attacker to be a blocker, pseudo vigilance. But really, I think it shines in the fact that it helps because the mana base is so small.
Yeah,
and it also helps with Groundswell, which we'll get into later.
Yeah, just being able to have 1 land be functionally 2 is a big deal here. Next, we got Skargan Pitskulk, which is green for a 1/1. Skargan Pitskulk can't be blocked by creatures with power less than it, and it has Bloodthirst 1. So if your opponent's been dealt damage this turn, this is a 2/2 that can't be blocked by 1 power or 0 power creatures. Also plays really nicely with pump spells. Does kind of make your timing of them awkward.
Right, because you have to pump pre-combat.
Or pre-blockers, at least. It's a little bit of a weird card, but it is a 2/2 for 1, and that's pretty much all this deck cares about.
Yeah.
Young Wolf is green for a 1/1 with Undying. So the first time, if it dies and it doesn't have a +1/+1 counter on it, it comes back with a +1/+1 counter on it. It's kind of a 1/1 for 2, and it does kind of invalidate a lot of removal from being really great. Does definitely push up the stock of cards like Magma Spray, though.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if more decks are running that. I'm actually not really 100%, but yeah, this card loves edicts, basically. It's just like, give me those all day. I'll eat them up. And I'll become a 2/2. And you won't be able to deal with me.
This just feels miserable when you have an edict in your hand, just like very difficult to deal with. And, it wears a Rancor pretty well. Next, we got 4 copies Burning Tree Emissary. Burning Tree Emissary is the big addition this deck got back when Modern Masters 2017 released. It's a red green for a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, add a red and a green mana to your mana pool. And the big thing about this is it's functionally free. There are very few hands that Stompy wants to keep where it only has one land in it. So you're almost guaranteed to make that second land drop and be able to cast this. And, you know, just for the sheer fact, like, even if you couldn't play anything else with it, just the sheer fact that sometimes you go Burning Tree Emissary into another Burning Tree Emissary is probably good enough. That said, the deck has kind of adapted itself to better suit the idea of using a red and a green mana without playing any red cards. And we can kind of get into that. We've got 4 copies of Nest Invader. It's 1 and a green for a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, you get an Eldrazi spawn, which is a token that is a 0/1, and it can be sacrificed for a colorless mana. And this definitely saw play before, mostly as Edict Protection. I personally really like this.
Yeah. The other thing that you can do, which we'll get to a little later, is you can pop that guy at a mana hunger, the Howlpack. So that's pretty strong. It also lets you chain off maybe another Nest Invader or any of your other 2-drops. So yeah, having the extra mana is pretty powerful, even in a deck that's predominantly green. And being able to trigger the hunger, the Howlpack, which I see in the version we've selected is actually a 4 of, is fairly strong. I'm not sure if this is... Yeah, this is one of the many. There are a couple different versions, I think, floating around. This one really looks to leverage hunger here.
Yeah. Also worth noting, like, that token can, you know, occasionally, you know, if your opponent doesn't have enough blockers, it's the least likely thing that they will block. And sometimes you can just toss a pump spell onto it and chip in for some damage.
Right.
You know, just the fact that it's an extra body on the ground can sometimes be important. Next, we've got River Boa, which is 1 and a green for a 2/1. It has Island Walk, and it has, for 1 green, Regenerate River Boa.
And this card is so obnoxious to play against.
Yeah, Regeneration is not a super common ability in Pauper, but this is a really, really good example of it, and it functions as kind of main deck hate card for blue decks. So just the fact that it's unblockable for some decks, coupled with the fact that it's a little harder to remove. Now, granted, Stompy doesn't have the most lands, and sometimes leaving up a green mana is really... it has a real cost attached to it for the deck. The ability to kind of invalidate a lot of, like, spot removal is really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Next up, we've got Vault Scourge, which is 1 and a black Phyrexian mana, so 1 colorless and 2 life, for a 1/1 flying artifact creature with lifelink.
And this is the Mirror Breaker.
Yeah. It's the Mirror Breaker. It's the Mirror Breaker, as well as just like a breaker for similar decks, not even necessarily Stompy, but just other aggro decks. This wearing a Rancor can just put you out of reach very, very quickly.
Yeah, that deck, or that card is very good. And yeah, that's a very strong play. Now imagine if you went Burning Tree into Vault Scourge Rancor, or Vault Scourge, and the next turn you Rancor. It's pretty strong.
Yeah, or just the fact that this is functionally 1 generic mana, and it can use that red mana produced by the Burning Tree Emissary, so it doesn't just go to waste. Makes this a little bit better. Makes the quote unquote stock go up. And definitely, like, this was already seeing inclusion as a main deck option before Burning Tree Emissary. It's just so much better now.
Yeah, since it's the Mirror Breaker, yeah.
Yeah, especially with how many copies of this deck are running around, it definitely is worth it. Rounding out the creature suite, we've got 2 copies of Wild Mongrel. Wild Mongrel is 1 and a green for a 2/2 Hound, and it has the ability to discard a card from your hand. Wild Mongrel gets +1/+1 and becomes the color of your choice until end of turn. And that last little bit, not dreadfully important, but it does make it pretty much immune to Doomblade. Apart from that, I can't think of any real color matters spells that we see that much.
Wild Mongrel has always been kind of interesting to me in decks like this. I'm not really sure how I feel about it. I think there are better cards you could play. For instance, this deck is not taking advantage of the Baskin Root Walla synergy, which I think if you play Wild Mongrel, you kind of do want. That being said, not sure what it would cut. I think this deck is going more, like I said, going more towards the Nest Invader Hunger package. But I could see it being defensible to, instead of playing Wild Mongrel, instead play something like Baskin Root Walla, which is a free spell with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the big thing with Wild Mongrel is just the fact that if you start flooding out, it turns your excess lands into damage.
And that's very true. So I can see that argument.
Yeah, it's not the world's best situation, but it certainly it lets you be proactive in a situation you usually would just kind of have to sit there and go, all right, let's draw a better card next time. Our spell suite is pretty limited. And most of these are kind of big pump spells. Giant Growth for a long time has been sort of the measuring stick as kind of like the iconic green pump spell. And every one of these pump spells actually has, the potential to be better. First, we're going to start with Groundswell, which you mentioned earlier. It's 1 green. Target creature gets +2/+2, but it has landfall. If a land entered the battlefield under your control this turn, instead, target creature gets +4/+4. And with Quirion Ranger, you can almost guarantee that this always is a +4/+4 for 1.
Yeah. Groundswell's insane.
Yeah, it's just very efficient, and sometimes that's enough. Next, another one that you've already mentioned, Hunger the Howl Pack.
Hunger the Howl Pack. You take it, sorry.
It's a green for an instant. Put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature, but it has Morbid. If a creature died this turn, instead put 3 +1/+1 counters on target creature. So this, as you mentioned, works very well with that token from Nest Invader.
Yeah, it's also really good just in combat, because if you lose a creature, they're like, haha, and you're like, nope, Hunger the Howl Pack into your turn or into my turn. Or, you go to kill something, they're attacked with 2 things, you try and bolt one, and then it dies, and then afterwards they Hunger the Howl Pack the other guy. Like, it's a very good card.
Yeah, Hunger just is really, really solid. And the fact that it represents a permanent pump is in some ways even better, especially since we've got stuff as well in here like Young Wolf, which is already terrible to use removal on. And definitely the Nest Invader tokens are a big upside. Rounding out the pump spell package at instant speed is Vines of Vastwood, which I have for years referred to as Vines of the Vastwood, and is, in fact, does not have the word "the" in the title anywhere. It's 1 green.
Cool.
Yeah, I know. It's 1 green. Target creature cannot be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control, and it has kicker of a green, so you can pay an additional green when you cast it. And if you do, that creature gets +4/+4. And this is a favorite of Infect in Modern. And is it good enough for Legacy Infect? It must be, right?
Vines, absolutely.
Yeah. Notably,
Vines is
this
a strong card.
Yeah, it is a very strong card. Notably, this doesn't give hexproof, and that is relevant at times. You can target your opponent's creature with it to stop them from targeting their own thing. Not a whole lot of cases where that's useful, though.
Right. Yeah, it's. I mean, I don't know. Maybe against Ulamog's Crusher suited up with Dragon's Breath. Hey.
Yeah, you can also use it against Freed from the Real, which is a creature-based combo deck. If you've got the mana for it, you can Vines targeting the thing that they're about to pop a Freed from the Real onto, and stop them that way. But again, it's just
it can do some work.
It's just a big old pump spell. Rounding out our ways to make creatures bigger is the iconic Rancor, which is green for an enchantment aura. Enchanted creature gets +2/+0 and has trample. And then the big kicker, when Rancor goes to the graveyard from the battlefield, return it to your hand. And oh my God.
You just always have it. So good. So good.
Yeah, it's just
you're always getting it back.
I've actually seen the rest of this cycle, which actually is 2 full cycles of cards with that last line of text. They're all auras. They all come back to your hand when they die.
Rancor's the best one.
Rancor is far and away the best one. One of the black ones is just enchanted creature gets -2/-0. Like, this is
Big whoop.
absurd.
Now, one thing I'd like to point out: no main deck Bone Splitter.
No main deck Bone Splitter, and I'm going to chalk that up to the last part of this deck, the fact that it is running 16 lands. That is...
And so instead it's running more creatures, I feel like.
Yeah, definitely like slimming down on the lands in order to make sure that it has a good threat density. And man, 16 is so scary to me. That's pretty low. I'm actually just gonna like pull up a hypergeometric calculator in the back here because I'm curious. Like okay,
what are the odds?
60 cards, successes in population 16, sample size 7, number of successes, let's say 2. So the odds of getting 2 lands in your opener, okay, that's not terrible. Like it's a 60%, but
do you think this deck can mulligan pretty well?
I think it mulligans fairly well just because of the density of 1-drops. As long as you're hitting like a couple lands, it's okay. Or 1 to 2. Anything more than that, though, it kind of starts to get into that territory of like, this might be a mulligan because I've already got a lot of land and I don't have a lot of action. I played this deck for a while when it was still in the pre Burning Tree Emissary days, and it's got some rough lines in it. I'll be honest. But let's not get too much into the sideboard or the price of this. I kind of want to get to our discussion topic. And this was something that we saw on the subreddit, someone talking about the different pump spells in Stompy and sort of their purposes. And one of the ones that I wanted...
You know, they all pump, but they're all different.
Yeah. What would you say the best of the pump spells in Stompy is?
Hands down is Vine's the best would.
Including Rancor, even though it's not a instant speed spell.
No, Rancor is the best one. Sorry, I guess Rancor is technically a pump spell. I just wasn't thinking of it. No, Rancor is far and away the best one.
Yeah,
because it gives you trample, which is huge.
Yeah, because most of these decks do not have another way to kind of get an evasion going on outside of Vault Scourge or Skargan Pit Skulk. And Rancor just represents so much value because I've definitely won games off where my start was just Nettle Sentinel, Rancor, and just start beating in with a 6/6 and cast whatever just to make sure that it's untapped.
Yeah, and then if you kill it, they get back both of the cards that actually matter, which are the 2 Rancors. Yeah,
because Rancor, like... It's not the best way to think about it, but it's kind of like getting a 2-power creature for 1 mana. It's not strictly true. Like if you don't have any creatures, Rancor just sits there dead in your hand, but it's a very, very powerful card. The rest of the sort of common inclusions, Groundswell, Hunger the Howlpack, and Vines, we've pretty much covered, but there's one I did want to talk about that I noticed was missing from this list. Mutagenic Growth wasn't here. Mutagenic Growth is a green Phyrexian instant. So you're mostly casting it for 2 life, and it's just target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. This is...
I missed that. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's a very good card, but I find, at least in my own personal experience, Mutagenic Growth does 2 things. It either lets you get in for lethal when your opponent thinks you can't possibly have it, or it lets you save a creature when your opponent thinks they've got good removal to line up with your stuff. And since we touched on the fact that Magma Spray might be one of the better pieces of removal in the upcoming meta, I kind of like Mutagenic Growth a little bit more now. But that's just me. What do you think?
I don't know. I feel like it's not the best. It's cool that it's free. In the mirror, you think it's good?
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
No.
It costs you.
I'm just saying in terms of like using this as a sort of defensive option, because we do have vines to stop removal, but just having
Vines
another
is
option.
terrible on the defense, though. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I could see it. I'm looking at the other cards here. I feel like all of your answers are really in Hunger the Howl Pack, where it's not so much you're trying to defend the creature dying; it's that you're shifting the power over to another one.
True, but let me bring up another fine minutia. If Magma Spray is now one of the premier removal spells in the format alongside Lightning Bolt, Magma Spray does exile. Like you don't get
true.
that that morbid trigger. I don't know. I just like mutagenic growth a little bit more than I think most do, and part of that is admittedly I'm not an amazing stompy player, but I think it does have enough gotcha cases where I think it still has some merit.
Leave it to your betters, Michael.
Yeah, I mean, someone will
I think
someone will undoubtedly tell me I'm wrong, so I'm prepared.
I think it's defensible. I do think it's interesting that it's not on the list because generally the list at least plays two of them. But maybe in the current iteration of the deck, and especially in this one, it seems to be very heavy on creatures and a lot lighter. There are a third of the spells that there are of the creatures. There's 30 creatures in this deck, and there are 10 pump spells. And well, I guess I'm not counting I'm not counting Rancor, so there's 14. But 4 of them are Rancor, and then 10 of them are just regular instants, and then 4 of them, Hunger the Howl Pack, affect the board permanently.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm getting is what would you cut? Would you cut the mongrels maybe?
Maybe I could see that. I do like the fact that they represent an outlet for games where you're flooded. I don't think that's the world's greatest situation to be in, but sometimes I'm sure you will get there off of that. And I imagine there's also times where, you've just been sandbagging cards and you just bash in with a mongrel and, smack them for a whole bunch. It does also just represent the threat of activation. So sometimes even if you're not going to pitch the cards, Wild Mongrel's still scary because it could become like a 5/5 out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I don't know what I would cut for it, but I'm a big fan. In terms of the other ones, Hunger, these are not subtle spells. Like, I don't know. It's not one of those ones where I can be like, oh, well, this is good when the meta does X.
Hold on. I would argue that in a meta where Burning Tree Emissary is good, the pump spells get worse because you want to be able to use that mana to commit further to the board, and you don't want to have to leave up mana for your pump spells. So a card like Hunger the Howl Pack is much better because you could theoretically attack and then lose maybe a creature and then go Burning Tree Emissary, Hunger. So I don't know, and so I think that there is definitely a shift here from more effervescent pump spells to more permanent pump spells like Hunger and Rancor. But then there's some you just can't cut. I mean, Vines is insane if you're it can easily win you the game, and then Groundswell is also really good. So I don't know if you can fully cut those, but I do think there's definitely a shift here in the makeup of the pump spells.
Yeah, and I definitely agree that Groundswell is kind of one of the trickier ones, especially with a lowered land count. When I last played Stompy, I was definitely on either 18 or 17 lands. So you're looking with a lower land count. Quirion Ranger is very fragile, and people are kind of, preparing for 2 power and under threats. So I think Groundswell's stock goes down just because it's not as dependably a +4/+4. It's still going to be live a lot of the time, but I just don't think it's a guarantee anymore.
But I like 2. I think 2 is a good spot.
Yeah. Let's get into the trash though, because I have this whole section, which I have labeled sideboard, jank, and older options. First up, Epic Confrontation. This shows up a lot in Stompy sideboards. It's one in a green sorcery. Target creature you control gets +1/+2 until end of turn. It fights a creature you don't control, so it's kind of removal.
Well, I don't see this card going anywhere anytime soon. It's a good card.
Yeah, I mean it's pseudo removal, and the pump is relevant. Like sometimes it does let you get in there for that extra point of damage, and that does matter.
And it's that one dude hitting that one dragon in the face.
Yeah, I've got the other one if you want to talk about it, because before Epic Confrontation, I definitely saw lists running Savage Punch, which is 1 in a green sorcery. Target creature you control fights a target creature you don't control.
And I mean,
it has,
that would be, not very long. One of them is from cons and one of them is from dragons.
yeah, this is a very short period. The big thing about Savage Punch is if you have Ferocious, so if you control a creature power 4 or greater, the creature you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn.
Is that the same fight. Guy punching the bear?
Yes, because
is this the enduring legend that he punches things in the face?
Yeah, I think that's Surok's whole thing. He punches things.
I am Surok.
Yeah, just throughout multiple timelines and the multiverse, he's just gonna punch things, man. That's just his lot in life. I don't like Savage Punch as much anymore though, just because it definitely feels a little Winmore-y, and the Epic Confrontation is just good most of the time, whereas Savage Punch is good in a smaller percentage of situations.
Yeah.
I've got a spicy one here. Gather Courage. Are you
let's talk about
with
that
this?
one. Yes. This is. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go take this one. Go for it, man.
Oh, it's a G instant convoke. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. And this has been played before as a one-of in a lot of stompy lists before in the pre-BTE era.
Yeah, and I think the cute interaction here is obviously using Quirion Ranger to untap something at instant speed and then gather courage something off of that, which I like. I actually think that's not the world's worst play. Or, you could convoke it off something and then untap that same thing with Quirion Ranger for a block.
And it's very similar to mutagenic growth. It's a 2/2 puzzle that tries cheap mana. The growth is better most of the time, I think, but I do like this card because it doesn't cost life.
Yeah, I don't think life is as precious a commodity. Definitely, since we are seeing a more aggressive bent to the format, I think it's more relevant than it used to be. But I still really like Gather Courage, even though it does kind of. It does it's got the cute interaction, but it also does have some sort of non-bows. Like if you want to play this aggressively, you want to have a creature up, which probably means you're playing it in your first main because otherwise you'd be attacking with it. And there's some cards like Skargan Pitskulk is miserable to play in your first main phase. Like that's just not good.
100%.
So it does kind of have some awkward situations, but the synergy with Quirion Ranger is not, completely null and void, and I do really like it. Next, I've got Seal of Strength, which is green for an enchantment, and you can sacrifice it and target creature. It's +3/+3 until end of turn. So this is a giant growth that mostly shows up in Infect, which is not a good deck.
No, it's not. The reason this card is better in that deck is because they're not looking to chip you away. They're looking to try and all in you.
Yeah.
I feel like in Pauper that's how Infect works. I think in Modern and Legacy it works a little differently. But in Pauper, they're playing all these cards that are trying to give them an edge, like one big turn to kill you.
And notably, the other thing about Seal is they can't hold up a counterspell when you're attacking in to deal with it because if it's already on the board, they've already missed their window of opportunity.
Right.
I don't know. It's middling, but it does have certain advantages over, say, Giant Growth, which is what this seal is. The seals were a cycle in Nemesis, and they all replicated famous spells. I think they were Disenchant, Unsummon, Dark Banishing, Shock, and Giant Growth. So, I don't know. Seal of Strength is a card that exists. Also, I've done a nice job, and I put the Noah Bradley art in here, which is quite nice.
Yeah.
Big old deer.
Excuse me.
Next up, we've got a pair, and these are, again, kind of more Infect cards. Predator's Strike and Larger Than Life. And both of these cost 1 and a green. Predator's Strike is an instant. Larger Than Life is a sorcery. They both grant a target creature trample, and Predator's Strike, the instant, only grants +3/+3, and Larger Than Life grants +4/+4. And both of these have seen play in Pauper Infect, And I kind of don't mind Predator's Strike if it weren't for the fact that it's always 2 mana, and sometimes that's a little outside of Stompy's reach.
Yeah. I think larger than life is bad in Stompy. I don't think you ever want sorcery speed pump spell. I think the only reason it works in Infect is because it makes your creature huge and it gains trample. So that's like a game-winning combo. Whereas in Stompy, it's not. Predator Strike, like you said, is just a little too mana inefficient. We have Rancor, which granted is one less power, but is recurable and is sticks around and costs less, and I don't know, blah 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 ad nauseum. I do like Predator Strike a little bit better in the BTE meta because you could, I guess, go Burning Tree into Predator Strike, which is kind of neat. But then, at that point, you might as well be playing larger than life.
I was gonna say that's kind of the issue, as well as the Kyrian Ranger trick where you bounce a land and replay it to double the mana off of it. You're still getting Predator Strike at sorcery speed. So I think in the deck you just play larger than life because it's better in those situations, and it's still not good.
Sure.
The last one, and we got into this one a little on the pre-show, but we wisened up. We saved it to discuss on air. Aspect of Hydra. Aspect of Hydra is a green for an instant. Target creature gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is your devotion to green. And I'll read the reminder text. Each green mana symbol in the mana cost of permanents you control counts towards your devotion to green. You don't like this.
Yeah. No, it's bad when you're behind. It feels like a win more. It's good when you have, more than one Burning Tree on the table, but if you have a Skargan Pit Skulk, I guess +1/+1, that's terrible.
All right. So personally, I like this because I liked it more in previous renditions of Stompy, where we had stuff like Garruk's Companion, or Garrick's Companion, excuse me. I never remember which one of those is the official pronunciation. I think it's Garrick, right?
I think it is Garrick.
Garrick's Companion. Garrick's Companion represented 2 green pips, and Aspect of Hydra has a lot of upside, but it does have, like, the fail case is much worse. The success case is really, really positive. And all I can think about is the fact that Burning Tree just represents 2 free pips of green mana for Aspect of Hydra. Like, if I go, Nettle Sentinel into Burning Tree Emissary, and a 1-drop, I feel like at that point, Aspect of Hydra is just a groundswell that you don't have to put any effort into.
Yeah. And I don't know. I can see that.
It kind of rewards your game plan anyway of committing to the board early with small threats. I don't know.
All right. I don't know. I don't think I'm 100% there with you. I guess I can see it. I just it just doesn't feel good to me. But
I mean, I totally get where you're coming from. Like, the fail case on this is horrible. Like, as you mentioned, like, if you only have 1 creature out, it's just 1 mana for +1/+1. Like, that's not good. But
right.
How many games with Stompy? I guess there's a decent amount of games with Stompy where you win with 1 creature on the board. Like, it's not an impossibility. The creatures are very big. I don't know. Yeah, I guess you're right.
No, Mike. You can have your no. Now I feel bad. You can have your dreams.
All right. So we've talked about these, and there's a wide variety of these, but it's really like a core, like 4 or 5 of these that are important and see play, and the rest are definitely like sideboard or just not played. And I think that kind of speaks to the fact that this is probably one of the most established decks. Like, they got a really cool new toy in the form of Burning Tree Emissary, and the deck barely changed.
Yeah, it was already a good deck.
Yeah. And, of course, its natural prey was the Delver decks, specifically Mono Blue Delver, because it just got equally efficient threats and Delver's counterspells line up poorly with the deck.
Yeah,
That
and
said,
then of course the blue-red Delver deck is much better against it.
yeah, specifically including red, so that it has a way to answer already resolved threats. And if you can remove a creature before that Rancor lands on it, you are 2 for 1-ing your opponent. Yeah,
yeah, and that feels great. That feels great.
Yeah. So as for its place in the meta, so Stompy got a free creature that is quite good. Right now, let me just tab over here because I'm actually curious. According to MTG Goldfish, which not always the most accurate, Stompy makes up 16% of our metagame, and it's about 5% of the metagame ahead of Affinity, which is our second place. And
what?
All right, buddy, calm down there. The Dark Carnival's not in town yet. But
down with the Affinity Clown.
Oh, I'd just like to let that one hang there for a little bit, but got to keep moving. Blue Red Delver's about the same share as Affinity. It's actually only had one less 5-0. Stompy is not like, I wouldn't say it's unhealthily dominant, but it's got a pretty good foothold in the meta. It's taken up about the same meta slice that Mono Blue Delver used to take up. So what should people be doing to kind of answer this threat within the format?
You just, I don't know. Honestly, it's, what am I trying to say? Stompy's a good deck. It's weird to me that we don't see more decks like Koldatha Boros, which preys on decks like Stompy, even with the addition of their free, their free card. So bolts are great. Galvanic Blast is great. Removal is just great against Stompy. Each one of their creatures does matter. Even if you have to spend a spell on each of them, they don't really have a lot of ways outside of Young Wolf of generating extra value. So, and I mean, maybe it's because of hunger, but I don't know. It just feels like if you're running enough removal, you should be able to deal with the deck, as well as cards like Standard Bear, which are incredibly good against Stompy. I just think you need to come prepared is mostly it. And I think Pauper is full of a lot of decks that try to get a little too cute, for lack of a better term.
No, I think that's a perfectly fair criticism. I'm also going to point out in the metagame, Boggles is taking up a pretty considerable slice of the meta. And do you think that possibly affects why Koldatha Boros is representing a smaller percentage of the 5-0s here? Because I imagine...
Oh, I could definitely see that.
I was going to say, like, I assume that if Boggles manages to resolve Armadillo Cloak and maybe, say, Ethereal Armor, I have a feeling that game is pretty much over.
Yeah, you basically have to win by playing a card that's actually good against Stompy. Oh, man. That's on the tip of my tongue. Standard Bear. Sorry. I know I just said it.
No. It's okay. Yeah, Standard Bearer is a pretty good hose for Boggles, but I think the fact that like there are some openers that Koldatha Boros has that don't hose Boggles, and the fact that that is a very powerful and very quick deck where most of your removal is pretty much null and void, I think that that's just enough to stop, like, I would not be surprised if Koldatha Boros is getting a decent amount of 4-1s. Again, don't want to harp. We have issues with the data that we're getting, and it's something I think the challenges will help with, because it'll let us see, what decks look good after, 6 to 8 rounds of Swiss play versus
Absolutely
5 semi-random opponents.
Absolutely. I'm very much looking forward to it.
I'm trying to think of what else could be stopping Boros, because how's the affinity matchup there? I imagine that's probably...
I mean, it's not, it's like 50-50, I want to say. I say with great confidence. Well, we have access to cards, or not Affinity. Boros has access to cards like Gorilla Shaman and Ancient Grudge, which are, really good against Affinity. But I think Affinity's creatures are better.
Okay, I could definitely see that. Yeah, your creatures get outclassed pretty quickly, and a lot of them are on the ground, especially in the form of your tokens, your Thraben inspectors, and I'm guessing you don't win that race very often unless you have an early rally the peasants.
Right, and I think the big thing is there's almost no outs to ATOG. You have like Journey to Nowhere.
True. I guess you could run Cop Red in the board, but that does not seem optimal.
No, I do not like Cop Red.
I guess you could also run. You could also bring in Standard Bearer, right?
No, it's bad
Why?
because they have Galvanic Blast.
Yeah, but it forces them to at least have Galv Blast and Fling.
All right, let's not get ahead of ourselves, Mike. But maybe, sure.
But for example, I don't know. So with Stompy, the thing that I like, and as you mentioned with Koldatha Boros, is good, cheap removal spells, because Stompy is a deck that doesn't deal well with a situation where it's getting 1-for-1 or even 2-for-1, just because it has so few ways to generate real card advantage.
Yeah, 100% agree. Yeah, I mean, that's what the long and the short of it. You need to play removal in a lot of it, and I feel like a lot of decks don't, and they try and do weird things like play Hills of Insight. I'm just kidding, Ben. You're great.
But yeah, in all seriousness, play early interaction. I mentioned a handful of times Magma Spray. Magma Spray is a very good card. If you can run it and you need a little bit more protection against this sort of deck, it handles Young Wolves. It hits everything in Stompy unless they have a spell to save it, in which case you're just 1-for-1ing with a different spell. If they burn a pump spell to save their creature on your turn, you have pretty much gotten value out of that removal. Don't run Edicts. Edicts are really bad against this deck right now. Even if it gobbles up one of their Burning Tree emissaries, that's you ate a free spell. That doesn't feel great.
Yeah, it's a 1-for-1, but I feel like it's way worse with Edict for some reason.
Well, I mean, with the Edict, you're kind of you're getting the thing they care least about, right? Like, we've definitely spoken before about like Punisher mechanics, I believe, where your opponent gets to make a choice, and in theory, both choices are bad, but in reality, one of them is worse. And they're always going to pick the one that's better for them. An Edict is not factor fiction where both options your opponent has are equally bad. It's not, here, I've made a gifts ungiven pile, and no matter what you do, you're not getting out of this. It's kind of just figure out what you want the least and get rid of it. So I definitely think black removal is not well poised against this deck, and I think that's a very real thing, and we're living in a post-Chainer's Edict world. It's just not that great a spell anymore.
I agree with you.
Other things that I'm trying to think of here, 1/3 bodies are surprisingly important right now. 1/3s kind of stonewall a lot. You're not really excited if your opponent has an Augur of Bolas to, use a pump spell to get it out of the way. That's not really fun or good. Whereas, it's not going to kill their thing. It's just going to make sure that, you kind of get stonewalled for a little bit. I also definitely like, Lone Missionary, which is a 2/1 for 2 who happens to have the text gain 4 life when it ETBs.
Yeah, that's I mean, that's good, and then it can trade with one of their things.
Yeah. And, having it on turn 2 isn't, backbreaking for them, but just the fact that if they have a Burning Tree in their opener, it's going to trade with the Burning Tree, and it's going to set them back 2 attacks from a similarly sized creature. It's again, I'm prone to these sorts of things that are indirect comparisons. It's kind of a counter spell on one of their pump spells.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that.
And in terms of like other aggro decks, I don't know. Affinity's kind of an aggro deck, but it plays on such a wildly different axis than any of the other aggro decks where I feel weird about it.
I think Affinity's a lot less consistent.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. The hands where you brick pretty hard. Versus where Stompy can kind of cobble stuff together, unless they're getting like a no lander or a 7-lander. You can probably cobble something together out of that, but I don't know. I'm not going to be playing in the challenge this week. As I mentioned, I've got people coming over, and I know you're not because you mentioned you've got a extracurricular activity you got to take care of, being a good friend and all that.
Say it, Mike. It's a bachelor party with my bros.
I really wish you wouldn't. I could say that. I could, but I shouldn't. But best of luck to anyone who's listening who is, I don't know, maybe currently playing, since this episode does go live to the public on Saturday or Sunday.
Can play Magic while listening to our show. That'd be that'd be awesome. That'd be awesome.
Caught yourself just in time there, buddy. This is a family-friendly podcast.
Yeah, that would really kick apples.
There you go. But good luck to y'all. Hopefully, whatever you're running does pretty well. If you're playing your homebrew, best of luck to you. If you're playing Stompy, best of luck to you. All I care about at the end of the day is getting some new forms of data on what the Pauper meta looks like as a whole.
That's sweet data. We want it.
Yeah.
You're going to give it to us.
Especially because, and I've talked about this briefly on the show and more in depth in private. There is kind of this trend of 5-0s with decks that can never quite get there again. And they divert a lot of attention away from, serious meta discussion about, what were you going to say?
I do think rogue decks are important, but I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, I'm not trying to tell people like don't homebrew, don't try and play rogue decks. What I'm saying here is there's a certain type of deck that crops up where it 5-0s and then it vanishes, and no one can ever recreate that 5-0 success.
Yeah, and that's less useful. I understand. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. And invariably there are large discussions online about this deck, and it kind of winds up wasting time where it could have been used discussing like, hey, is my Stompy list running an optimal 75? Here are the 4 cards that I'm considering a flex slot, and what do you think is best for handling this chunk of the meta? Which is a discussion I think would benefit the community as a whole. We're pulling up on an hour. This is the part where I would usually cut to the baffling fan favorite of main deck sideboard unplayable. But we've got another gag bit at the end here. And this is a time honored joke of metal band or magic card. And in this case, it could be both. Adrian, would you like to play a game with me?
I want to play a game. The device on your face is a reverse bear trap.
That was actually a pretty solid impression. I'm impressed. But I have assembled from my weird knowledge of obscure bands and weird knowledge of old Magic cards a series of, quandaries, shall we say. I'm going to start you off with Kiss of Death. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to tell you what the Magic card does, and I'm going to read to you a summary of information I could find about the band online. And you're going to have to guess if it's a Magic card, a metal band, or both.
Okay, so before we get into that, Running Wild does have a song called Kiss of Death.
I am strictly using band names here for reference. I didn't want to delve too deep and make it too difficult. So Kiss of Death is a sorcery out of Portal 2. It costs 4 black, and it deals 4 damage to target opponent, and you gain 4 life. The band Kiss of Death, however, is a band from Italy with very, very little information available about them online. They were formed around 1994. They performed thrash metal. They were an unsigned band, and it's unclear as to what year they finally broke up as a band. Now, is this a card out of Portal or a metal band from Italy from the 90s?
Or both? Dude,
Or both.
It could easily be either one of these. This is way harder than I thought. I'm going to go with both.
It is actually. I really tried to find more information on Kiss of Death, hoping it would be weird and confuse you, but yes, it is both. Next up,
1-0.
1-0. Next up, King Goblin. King Goblin is a creature goblin from starting way back in Alpha. It is 1 red for a 2/2. Other goblins you control get +1/+1 and have Mountain Walk. With the reminder text, they can't be blocked as long as the defending player controls a mountain. The band King Goblin, however, is a Japanese psychedelic doom stoner sludge rock band that formed in 1997 and is still active to this day. They started as a death grind influenced band like Carcass or Brutal Truth, but from the first demo on, they played a weird combination of doom, stoner, sludge metal / psychedelic rock, 70s prog, and free jazz with partly growling vocals. So is King Goblin a magic card or a band?
Mike, I can tell you're trying to set me up for a stone cold stunner. It is a band and not a magic card. Goblin King is the name of the magic card.
All right. To be fair, I had a feeling you might get that one. You're correct. It is a band. The card text I was reading you was Goblin King.
Yeah.
Finally, to wrap this one up, Death of 1,000 Stings. Now, is this either a card out of Kamigawa block with it is an instant arcane for 4 and a black. Target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have more cards in hand than each opponent, you may return Death of 1,000 Stings from your graveyard to your hand. Or is it a band from Belgium, more specifically Ghent in East Flanders, who are still active, formed in 2001. The band's name is derived from Ling Chi, a method of torture and execution officially employed in China until 1905 and was known as slow bleeding, or more dramatically, Death of 1,000 Stings.
This one's hard to think it also be both, but I'm going to go with my first reaction. I know for sure it is a magic card. I'm going to go with magic card.
You are correct. The band in question is actually named Ling Chi, which does translate to Death of 1,000 Cuts, which is an actual torture method that was the inspiration for that card. Well done.
And everyone, I did not use the internet. The only thing I looked up to make sure Kiss of Death was a running wild song at the very beginning.
Yeah, I trusted you well enough. So I think the main thing here is I want to kind of spice things up. I know that main deck sideboard unplayable has gotten, frankly, a baffling amount of support from our fans, but I kind of want to swap things up. We've got some ideas that we've tossed around of, how we could make the outro segment more interesting. If you have an idea, though, you can let us know on Twitter. You can hit us up on Facebook or any of the other social media things, or just email us. But without further ado, I'm going to let Adrian take us out of the show.
No dates this week. Well, thank you all for joining us today. This podcast is brought to you by the support of our patrons. So please consider supporting us if you like the show. Check below this video or the description of this podcast for details on where to find us. We'd like to remind you that if you're listening to this on a platform with reviews, they're always appreciated because they boost our visibility. If you've got a deck list or idea for a topic, feel free to contact us either via our website or by emailing us directly at colorcommentary@gmail.com. Special thanks to Pat's Games and L. Until next week, this is Adrian and Mike, and we are signing off for Color Commentary.